now. Um, so the second complication is that we have a language divide between, notice that he says, my mom wrote to me in Spanish, and he's writing very proficiently in English. So therefore, um, um, the kind of reader or readership that he will get, it's highly, extensive, so broad that how can you restrict the dissemination of information? And it seems that this is something any writer will go through, right? If you say write a fiction and you are sort of basing your fiction on your family or friends or people you know, they will come up to you and they will say, why did you write that about me? Even though what you wrote, pertains to a character with a different name and a similar situation maybe, but not exactly what took place. So yes, if you write nonfiction, you'll be blamed. And if you write fiction, you also will get blamed for what you wrote. Um, so the writer has to make a decision here, right? I'm going to tell the story in some way, and I'm going to just write it. Okay, write it. Um, the Mr. Secret's title. Well, notice that his mother is telling him, "You're not keeping the family secrets. The dirty laundry stays at home. Why are you doing this?" So according to her, he's airing too many dirty laundry, I guess, many topics that belong in the family only, issues, situations. So is he keeping any secrets? Um, as Jaylene was saying, I think she's accurate in describing the situation. They think that he comes home and there is no communication. There's kind of a divide that they they feel. And even throughout the chapter, I think if I recall well, uh, he says the Christmas party was ending, and I approached my father, or he approached me, and he said something to me, and Richard Rodriguez goes, and this was the only sentence my dad had said to me uh, until this moment. They had not even, spoken much that day. And if you go back to the previous chapters, he's saying something similar, right? I go back to my house and we don't have extensive conversations. But it seems that um, at least with his mother, he keeps talking constantly. Um, okay, so um, let's examine more in detail what he's writing about in this chapter. He describes a contradiction, okay, um, that when if you remember this moment in the chapter when he's in the talking to friends or his own family, someone says to him, "I do not recognize you in what you write." Who is that person? Um, because they know him, in person, and there is no there seems to be a disconnect between the persona he becomes as he's writing and the person he is actually uh, in conversation with friends and family. Um, where do we have that? I'm looking for the segment. Well, I'm going to stop at page 185. Let me see. For you, this would be 200. Page 200 in the black cover book. So it's actually a quotation or a segment that begins page 184 in my book. And the paragraph is at the end, and it reads, "Many mornings at my desk, I have been paralyzed by the thought of their faces, their eyes. I imagine their eyes moving slowly across these pages. That image has weakened my resolve. Finally, however, it has not stopped me. Despite the fact that my parents remain, even now in my mind, a critical, silent chorus standing together, I continue to write." Okay, I continue to write. Um, so it's kind of, he's the contrarian, right? And he's the only writer in the family, and he's also a writer of big success. So many readers. Not only that, but TV interviews. He was part of the of PBS News, and he would have a segment for several years in which he would read and present short essays, not necessarily about his family, okay? Just many cultural issues. So he was a presence on TV for many years. Um, okay, but here we're talking about what he's saying about his family, right? And how he feels this tension between father, mother, and himself, not necessarily his siblings, okay? He never says his siblings are actually, I think, unless you find something and correct me, okay? Uh, but here he's talking about his parents. Um, I think this is very interesting what comes after, okay, in this segment, in terms of his stance towards writing and becoming a writer, okay, in the States. So I'm gonna ask somebody to read here. Megan, could you please read what comes after?
After the part you just read, after the many mornings.
Um, I read, um, despite the fact, yes, despite the fact that my parents remain even now in my mind a critical, silent chorus, standing together, I continue to write. After that,
Okay. I do not make my parents' sharp distinction between public and private life. With my mother and father, I scorn those who attempt to create an experience of intimacy in public. But unlike my parents, I have come to think that there is a place for the deeply personal in public life. This is what I have learned by trying to write this book. There are things so deeply personal that they can be revealed only to strangers. I believe this. I continue to write.
yes, that's a segment that I wanted us to read. Then there is a question. He says that his parents are nowadays asking him questions from time to time. They are retired, they have time to be just thinking about lots of things, and they come up with questions to Richard. And one of them, after this segment, is this question: "What is psychiatry?" Okay, psychiatry. My mother asks, and he tries to give, an explanation to his mom. It's difficult for him, and then when he explained what is it that happens, what people go to see a psychiatrist, he says, well, she says, "That's nonsense. Why are people doing that?" Okay, which is part of the whole chapter topic, right? The main issue here: intimacy, privacy, um, a public voice, public writing, um, I guess, maybe a journal that one would write for himself and keep, um, by his bed, and that's just for you, not necessarily for you to show to anybody else. Um, but what do you think about, um, with my mother and father, I scorn those who attempt to create an experience of intimacy in public. This refers back to the idea that many middle-class people in America nowadays go to shows on TV and they pretend, okay, celebrities pretend that they are telling you part of their private life. So his mother says about them, they are so cheap. Okay, these people just go on TV and they blurt out anything that belongs actually in the household among intimates. Why are they doing that in the States? Why are people going to on TV to tell us about their private business? Okay, that shouldn't be happening. And so he says, yeah, I agree with my mother and my father. I scorn those who attempt to create an experience of intimacy in public. I know this, I know Richard Rodriguez says it's fake. I know it's fake, okay? But that's part of, if you think about it, maybe the media, pop culture, I don't know, okay? TV culture. But unlike my parents, I have come to think that there is a place for the deeply personal in public life. And he goes and says, notice, this is a big statement. There are things so deeply personal that they can be revealed only to strangers. And then at the end of the paragraph, he goes and writes, there are things too personal to be shared with intimates. What is he saying according to you? What is he saying when he says that, Jimena?
Honestly, I think it's because when he says there are things too personal that can only be told to strangers is something that these strangers don't know anything about the people he is speaking of or him themselves. So he, if he were to tell them, there's no real danger of them thinking badly of them. And I think the opposite is true as well. Um, when not wanting to share your deepest wishes or desires or thoughts with somebody that you know well, or even a little.
I could add that maybe the emotional impact will be too much, right? Because
Absolutely.
yeah, you have shared you have shared experiences with a person you are very close to, and then you know what will, if you say something what that may trigger and you don't want to say it, okay, you feel like you don't need to say it. And whereas, as Jimena has explained, there might be something that took place, say in your family or with friends, and if you say it in public, people will not be able to necessarily relate to it emotionally on the same in the same fashion that people close to you will. And it would be kind of objective, right? It will be on the table for people to think about it, maybe learn about it as he is showing it throughout the book, and reflect on it, but not necessarily, have this kind of very deeply emotionally charged reaction to what you are saying or writing. Uh, that's why he gives us the example of the psychiatrist, because he's saying, yeah, people go and they talk to the psychiatrist and they tell them, whatever has been happening in their lives. And his mother goes, that's absurd. And he says, Richard Rodriguez, well, at least my mother, would go and go to confession. So there is that kind of display, or right, not display, but what is it? Sharing of uh, private thoughts and experiences with someone. Mm-hmm. But to do it with the psychiatrist, for her, it would be totally out of the question, okay, an absurdity. Um, again, to show why he is so different to his parents because of his education, also because he has decided to have this public persona through his writing. Um, So I was trying to look for that too, when they tell him that he doesn't resemble the persona that he seems to be as he writes his essays. Where was that? So I think it was, it's before that, it's before that. But I don't find it here. Let me see if I can refer to my page 188. But I need to give you your page, 188. Well, it would be page 204, most likely. There's one segment that kind of summarizes his thinking. He says in the paragraph that begins, my teachers gave me a great deal more than I knew when they taught me to write public English. At the end of the paragraph, he says, or he writes, but the man who sits in his chair so many hours, his father, and the woman at the ironing board, keeping busy because I don't want to get old, that's what she says, will never be able to believe that any description of their personal lives could be understood by a stranger far from home. But he does trust that that will happen, and that's why he's writing. Then, by the end of the chapter, what I found interesting is his description of his siblings. And that's why I wanted to comment at least on page 119 in my book, and then 194. And this pertains to the idea of accomplishment, success, and the American dream for a family of 2 immigrants, Mexican immigrants. Maybe you missed it, so I want to highlight it for you, okay, what he says about his siblings. That's page 191. And in your book, if you have the black cover book, it's 208. 199, 191. The paragraph reads, sitting beside me as usual is my young girl, right? So I need for somebody to read that. Who could read?
What was the page again?
It's in my book, 191. In the other book is 208. It's a very short paragraph, 3 lines. This is the Christmas celebration. All the family gathered together. They are grown-ups now. Richard has written his book, I think. And so they are no longer, children coming just to back from school. No. Anybody who could read the paragraph?
I got it.
Thanks.
Sitting beside me, as usual, is my younger sister. We gossip. She tells me about her trip last week to Milan. We laugh. We talk about clothes, mutual friends in New York.
Yes. And the one word that I wanted to highlight was Milan. She tells me about her trip last week to Milan. Why do you think I might want to highlight that word in particular?
Because she's successful.
Highly successful and sophisticated enough to go to Milan, of all places. Maybe fashion, the place of fashion, right? Expensive, fancy. But if you miss the reference, you cannot perceive what he's saying in terms of class success, social mobility. And then let's go to the other page. page 194. In my book. In yours, if you have the black cover book, it's 211. The paragraph begins in page 194. Children are bundled up. And it's a very short paragraph as well. Lindsay, could you read it?
Could you please repeat the page number, Professor?
Yes, if you have the brown book, it's 194, 194.
Okay, and
And the beginning of the sentence is, children are bundled up. They have brought very expensive gifts for his mother and his father, he says. And notice that the gifts are not necessarily very useful, are for them to be displayed around the house, okay? And that's another example of success, economic success. So you have it, Lindsay?
I'm still looking. I'm sorry, Professor.
Children are bundled up for the fast walk to the car. My mother stands by the door calling goodbye. So they are leaving, right? The celebration has ended. She stands with a coat over her shoulders, looking into the dark where expensive foreign cars idle sharply. She seems all of a sudden very small. She looks worried.
Right.
But the sentence that matters, right, is for my comment is where expensive foreign cars idle sharply.
All right. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm
No
very
problem.
sorry. I'm having trouble finding it.
No need to apologize. Okay, that's quite all right. And so, you know, the arc from the humble beginnings, if you will, you know, all over to this moment when they became adults, professionals in their own right, ascended for the book. And I think he says that, correct me if I'm wrong, I think he says that his brother is a doctor, MD, and that his two sisters, they are business, what is it? Not managers, but business, what is it? Well, they have important positions in whatever institution they are at, or organization. So very well paid jobs, okay? He makes sure to tell us that that's the family situation nowadays. So therefore, not only the children succeeded, but his parents succeeded because they made sure to provide them with opportunities. And of course, he's talking about his own process of education. So sending this kid, Richard Rodriguez, to Catholic school for him, he's talking about elementary school also as a key moment, right? Because if you don't get the right elementary school education, then your chances of succeeding are very, very, very poor. The moment when he described this nun spending hours and hours with him, and only with him, that moment was very important for my reading, okay? Because I thought, well, you need to have the means, right, to provide for that kind of education. And many schools may not have the resources to do that regarding students who need some kind of special training. If that is not going to happen, then we don't have a fair play, we don't have the same opportunities. Because not necessarily all children will start, at the same level. And this is what he's highlighting for his own process of education.
I found it. I finally found it. But the page number was not 194, it's 211.
Also, you have the black cover book. Yeah,
I
it's too
guess so. I'm so sorry for keeping everyone waiting.
Don't apologize. No need, Lindsay. That's
Okay.
totally fine. Totally
Just
fine.
read it. Just read it. Children are bundled up for the fast walk to the car. My mother stands by the door calling goodbye. She stands with the coat over her shoulders, looking into the dark where expensive foreign cars idle sharply. She seems all of a sudden very small. She looks worried. Don't come out. It's too cold. Someone shouts at her or at my father, who steps out onto the porch. I watch my younger sister in a shiny mink jacket bend slightly to kiss my mother before she rushes down the front steps. My mother stands waving toward no one in particular. She seems sad to me. How sad? Why? Sad that we are all going home. Sad that it's not quite, can never be the Christmas one remembers having had once. I'm tempted to ask her quietly if there's anything wrong. But these are questions of a paradise, Mama. My brother drives away. Daddy shouldn't be outside, my mother says. Here, take this jacket out to him. She steps into the warmth of the entrance hall and hands me the coat she has been wearing over her shoulders. I take it to my father and place it on him, and in that instant, I feel the thinness of his arms. He turns. He asks if I am going home now. It is, I realize, the only thing he has to me all evening.
There you go. As I was commenting, about the sentence or the word that he would say at the end of the Christmas party. What is mink?
Mink is a type of animal. It's a type of weasel animal, and minks are usually used in like fur farms. Like,
Yes.
they're basically weasels, and they're very well known. Their fur is very well known to be fur coats. It's type of fur animal that is turned into a fur coat.
Yes, and as far as I know, again, that's a very expensive item to have. Okay, the mink coat. So notice, in passing, again, right? He tells you about success, big success, economic success, social success for the family. Okay, and is that all? Is that all? Do you have any comments about the chapter or the book? Is that all when we refer to Mr. Secrets?
To be honest, I feel like it's kind of odd because it really just stretches the you know what I'm saying, these items that like that shows a certain type of lifestyle. When you talk about the mink, and you talk about stuff like that, or like Milan, like you said earlier, it kind of like these are things like the mink. Generally speaking, only like the very rich people can like afford that. You know what I'm saying? So it kind of really speaks on a lifestyle that it one will want to obtain in this life. So it kind of really stretched the like this realism.
Yeah, there is something along the way that he also says regarding money, because he says, and writing, money and writing, writing and money. He says, I'm not writing to get rich necessarily. That has never been necessarily my intention. This is something that is meaningful to me, that I enjoy doing, that is rewarding, it's taxing too when I do it. But my intention with this has never been necessarily to become very, wealthy. Although I have wealthy, well-to-do friends who, from time to time, when I need a job, they will help me out. and I'll get this job right here, right there, that will allow me to continue writing. But one could argue that though he wasn't intending to get lots of money because of his writing, he was intending to become a public personality, and also to attain success through his writing, which he did. And let me tell you, not necessarily many writers become so prominent in a specific moment in time in a society. There are writers who may be wonderful writers, right? That will get to know about them after they pass, after they are dead. And so, in this case, he would be saying to us, I think, I am successful in the sense that I know that people recognize me because of my writing, my articles, my essays. Okay, and this is during my life. So I've gotten recognition, public recognition because of my, say, proficiency with the English language. So I think that's important. But there is one aspect of his life that is totally missing from this book. And given our conversations, you know what I'm suggesting here. What is it? But I want you to say it. What is missing from the book? One side of his life. Anybody? Which is funny because he's saying, he's titling this chapter Mr. Secrets.
His love life.
Yes, his love life. Yes. His awareness of being different. His awareness of being homosexual. His awareness of being gay. But if you watch the interview, the video for last week, there was an interesting moment and question, which remember when the interviewer says to him, the Canadian interviewer says to him, "So you're gay?" Remember what he said as a reply? He immediately said, "I am not gay." Or I think the interviewer says, "So you're a gay writer?" And he says, "No, I'm not a gay writer. I am a morose writer." And he laughs, kind of. I think that's a standard answer that he's had for many years, maybe. I am a morose writer. Which, in the way I read that moment, okay, that telling moment is that I don't want for you to place me in this gay writer box. That's the way I read it, okay? I want to go even against that way of classifying me. But as Kaylee was saying, where is that side? If he knew, when early on that he was a child that was different, that felt different attractions, right? Maybe in my questioning, my questioning of the autobiography, I read this. Was he isolating himself because he couldn't be himself? Was he also finding in reading these many books, as he says, hundreds of books, a moment to be with himself and actually be himself, okay, through the books? Because within the family, he may not have been able to, to be himself. And at the school, notice, Catholic school, Irish nuns. So how was he going to find a way to be himself? Interestingly, for the book, right, if he doesn't mention it, the question would be, why does he not mention it at all? Any answers for you? Any answers that you may have?
Like, you repeat the question, like, why doesn't he mention like his sexuality, or why doesn't he mention his love life?
Why why does he mention his um, that he is homosexual?
Well, because like especially during those times, people were far less uh open-minded when it comes to things like, you know what I'm saying, being gay or being bisexual or being a lesbian, stuff like that, you know. Um, unfortunately, it could definitely have a negative impact on your career. Also like your social mobility stuff, your ability, like your social mobility and your ability to go different places, you know, a lot of doors will be closed. So, you know, yeah, like there was, and you know, you always like fear for your personal health too.
Oh, I see, I see. Yes, there are many reasons, as Shamani is saying, you know, there are many, many reasons. Uh, one that I would like to highlight, and I totally agree with you, Shamani, okay? One that I would like to highlight is that um, maybe for his family as well, you know, parents, and I don't think his siblings necessarily because they are from the same generation, but his parents, maybe that was something uh, he felt he couldn't disclose. Um, maybe he thought, you know, this will create a true divide between us. Um, so, and I'm kind of guessing, but I'm not necessarily, you know, guessing that much. That was a powerful reason as well. And notice how the autobiography would change. Okay, but he's never in his writings. He wrote in his second book. He also alludes to that in a lengthy essay. Then in his third and fourth books, he also has essays, but these essays are very highly creative, and um, it's not like, you know, he's with the flag, you know, and saying and out loud or kind of yelling at it. No, he reflects, you know, he's a very reflexive writer. um, so, and probably also because of what I just said, you know, I don't want to be placed in in any box. Okay, I want you to see me as a writer, and also don't place me necessarily where the supposedly, you know, books of the for minorities will have to be. Okay, where are you going to place me in your bookstore? Where are you going to sell my books, and so on and so forth? So it's always, you know, challenging maybe stereotypes that people may have about his writing. Uh, I want to um, leave us maybe with a bit of a video here. I'm going to share my screen. By Sonia Sotomayor. I'm going to choose Sonia Sotomayor in this case. Let me see, where do we have it? Not there, not there. Here.
Next question. So Tara Srinivas, where's Tara? Ah.
All right. So my question, well, I'm Tara. I'm a sophomore studying neuroscience. And my question is, in your opinion, what are the top 2 challenges that young women face today? And how would you advise them to prepare for these challenges?
They haven't changed. Challenges have remained the same from when I was growing up to when you're growing up. For those young women in the audience, because you have a woman president, a woman dean of the college, you are 54% of the school, you don't figure there's gender discrimination, right? You don't generally feel it, okay? Not in your life up to now. The reality, however, is that the larger society, that's not necessarily true. And if you look at the statistics, women doing the same work still earn less than men. You can't fight the facts. The measures have been studied over and over and over again, and pay equality is still one of the biggest issues our nation faces. So that will occur in your life. Look at most other industries. I take education out of it, okay? But perhaps not completely. I think your president might be able to tell me whether women presidents are the norm yet in higher education.
No.
Probably not. There's a lot more of them in law school as law school deans, but they're still not predominant there. Go to law firms. There's a lot more partners than when I started. When I started, firms of 300 and 400 had 1 or 2 female partners, and they were touting how progressive they were. What a joke, right? The statistics are better, but it's not compared to the proportion of women in the profession. They told me that over time we would reach equality. Now, I started in 1979, and there's still only 1/3 women as federal judges. And we're a lot of women in the profession. So what's happened? We still have to fight gender inequality. It still exists. It exists in people's stereotypes, in how they view women compared to men. You know, one day in the DA's office, one of my supervisors had a woman prosecutor come into his office in tears over something. And his response was, "Please don't do that. Go in the bathroom and throw up the way men do." I don't know if he meant it as a joke, but it made the rounds of the office, okay? I do think that people evaluate successful people on their own self-models. So in the workplace, if your bosses are men, they're looking for clones of themselves. That's what they were successful. A clone of them will be successful. That's why in most situations, when you're looking at promotions, most of the promotions will be people who are similar to the people doing the promotions. And if they are men, that's what's going to happen. And there's ways of doing things that differ among men and women. And I often talk in my classes to women lawyers and talk to them about how you have to be conscious of how you present yourself in the court. You don't have to be loud if you speak softly, but you do have to train yourself to modulate your soft voice so it projects, because you need people to hear you. You also have to modulate your speech so that you keep people interested.
I'm going to stop right here. Thanks for staying with me for 2 more minutes. I just thought that it was necessary to hear her voice. So I'll see you Thursday with poetry by Martin Espada. Have a nice day.
Later, Professor.
Take care.
Have a good one.
You too. Thank you.